71 years of quiet life crumble when veteran Jonathan and his grandson Tyler receive the results of a DNA test. 3 hearts, 2 fathers. One choice: love or leave. Which will prevail? Jonathan Davis rose with the sparrows, just as he had every morning since retirement, and padded barefoot across the kitchen linoleum, still cool from the night air. At 71, routine had become the gentle drum that steadied his days. Grind the Sumatra beans Ruth once loved. Set the kettle to whistle. Open the blinds in a slow sweep that filled the room with pale gold. He carried his mug to the small sun porch and settled into the wicker rocker whose paint had begun to chip like old enamel, revealing earlier layers of sky blue, and, deeper still, the robin's egg hue Ruth swore kept storms at bay. He balanced a leather-bound album on his knees, the hinges creaking in familiar protest. The earliest tintypes, his great-grandmother in a stiff collar, a Civil War veteran whose eyes refused to meet the lens, had always filled him with a sense of belonging to something larger than himself, an unbroken strand reaching back through dust and patience. The photos smelled of camphor and sun-dried cotton. They smelled of home. Yet lately the past felt less like an anchor and more like an unsolved riddle. Ads for at-home DNA tests fluttered across his television, promising revelations in neat percentages. 22% Yoruba, 8% Scottish, perhaps a whisper of Quechua. Jonathan found himself lingering on those commercials. He had traveled little, had fought in a war that taught him how wide the world could be, yet he'd never mapped the continents inside his bones. The tipping point arrived one bright April afternoon when Tyler, his 12-year-old grandson, bounded through the porch door, clutching a school project on family trees. "Grandpa, can you help me fill in the blanks?" the boy chirped, spreading a poster board dotted with empty leaves. Jonathan smiled, but the blank spaces unsettled him. What stories could he pass down if he didn't know them himself? That evening, he searched online until his eyes blurred, comparing kits that boasted larger databases or deeper haplogroup dives. He ordered 2, one for himself, another for Tyler. It felt like buying a pair of tickets to a museum no one in the family had visited, each exhibit a corridor of blood and time. He pictured unveiling the results at their annual October gathering, when kin from 3 states converged for sweet tea toasts beneath the sycamore, and imagined the delight of announcing, "Here is where your laughter began, generations ago." The next morning he told Tyler, swearing him to secrecy. The boy's grin widened with conspiratorial thrill. "We'll be history detectives," he said, and Jonathan's heart warmed. As spring eased into summer, Jonathan tended his tomatoes and watered the hydrangeas Ruth had planted along the fence. He wrote a list for October: carve ham, bake Ruth's pecan pie, reveal ancestry. Each checkmark felt like a promise to the dead and to the living. When the padded envelope finally arrived, white as bone against the brass mail slot, Jonathan's hands tingled. He followed the instructions twice over, swabbing the inside of his cheek, sealing the vial. Tyler did the same, eyes shining at the odd science of it all. They mailed the packets together, Tyler tossing them into the blue collection box with a flair that made passers-by smile. "Adventure secured," the boy declared. Weeks slipped by. Tomatoes reddened, birds molted into duller feathers, and the first hint of September breeze brought the scent of wood smoke across the yards. Jonathan found himself listening for the mail truck, the way a child listens for sleigh bells. Whenever Tyler visited, the boy asked, "Any news from the lab?" Jonathan would shake his head, and both would grin at the shared suspense. Underneath anticipation, a whisper Jonathan couldn't name began to coil. He dreamed once of a map that rearranged itself whenever he tried to trace a route, rivers bending away from his finger. He woke unsettled, but blamed the late-night chili. Still, on quiet afternoons, he opened the leather album and wondered which faces might soon gain sharper focus, which stories would realign like constellations after a telescope adjustment. He did not yet imagine that some constellations might vanish altogether. The results came on a Tuesday, wrapped in an innocuous manila envelope. Jonathan almost missed it under a circular for gutter cleaning. He carried the mail to the kitchen, heart thrumming with the hopeful rhythm of a drumline. Tyler was due after school. They would open the envelopes together. He brewed fresh coffee, set out 2 peanut butter sandwiches, one with jelly for Tyler, one plain for himself, and arranged the envelopes beside a pair of scissors on the oak table. Every few minutes he drifted to the window, scanning for the yellow school bus. At 3:27, Tyler burst through the door, backpack half unzipped, sneakers squeaking on the tile. "Are they here?" Jonathan nodded, suddenly aware of perspiration along his temples. They sat. Tyler sliced the first envelope open with exaggerated care. A tri-folded report slid free, heavy with color-coded charts. They unfolded Jonathan's results first. The numbers felt almost musical. 43% West African, 16% Central African, 22% Scots-Irish, scattered notes of indigenous Caribbean and Iberian. Jonathan mouthed the names of distant regions as though savoring spices. Tyler peppered him with questions. Where is Benin? Was there really a Spanish sailor in their line? Jonathan laughed, cheeks warm, mind already weaving tales he would research. Then, Tyler's envelope. The boy handed Jonathan the scissors. Jonathan cut a neat line, pulling out the second report. He scanned down the first column and paused. The percentages bore resemblance to his own, but faintly, like echoes on a far wall. 3% genetic match to his profile. That could not be right. He read again. The number did not change. "What's it say, Grandpa?" Tyler leaned forward, eyes bright. Jonathan swallowed. The kitchen seemed to tilt, the air thickening as if water had slipped in to replace oxygen. It looks like we need a little clarification from the lab," he managed. Tyler's brow furrowed. "Is something wrong?" "Probably a mix-up," Jonathan said, forcing a smile so taut it hurt his cheeks. "These things happen." He folded the report swiftly, tucking it beneath his own. His fingers shook. They moved to the porch, eating sandwiches in a silence stitched with questions Tyler tried not to ask. The boy spoke instead about math homework and a new video game. Jonathan nodded, hearing none of it. Numbers danced before his eyes. 3%. Not grandson. Stranger. When Tyler's mother, Melissa, arrived to pick him up, Jonathan watched them drive away, her taillights winking at the stop sign. She waved. He lifted a hand stiff as kindling. Inside, he unfolded the report again, stared until the words blurred into dark water. He dialed the lab. A recorded voice put him on hold to a soft piano loop. His pulse hammered. Finally, a technician confirmed kit barcodes, double-checked sample IDs, and repeated, "Our error rate is below 0.1%, sir." Jonathan hung up. The house creaked in evening heat, yet he shivered. He pressed a palm to the album on the coffee table, as though steadying it would keep the past from tipping. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, he reached for the phone again and dialed his son's number. Each ring sounded like the tick of a distant metronome counting down to something irrevocable. Alex answered on the fourth ring, voice cheerful. "Hey, Dad. Everything all right?" Jonathan opened his mouth, but the truth wedged against his throat. The best he managed was, "Can you come by tomorrow?" Something important's come up. A pause. Of course. Is Mom's old heart clock acting up again? Alex joked softly. Jonathan's eyes flicked to the mantel where the brass pendulum of Ruth's heirloom clock swung, steady and indifferent. Not the clock, he said. Just come. He ended the call, lowering himself into the rocker. Dusk seeped through the screens, cicadas beginning their gritty chorus. Jonathan listened, feeling as though he were trying to breathe through burlap. Somewhere inside, a fragile certainty splintered. The album's chain of faces, once unquestioned, now held a missing link that rattled in the dark. Sleep mocked him that night. When it came, it was shallow, punctured by dreams of blank family trees, each branch snapping off at his touch. He rose before dawn, brewed coffee strong enough to scrape the lining of his stomach, and watched the horizon inch from charcoal to rose. At 9 sharp, Alex's pickup rumbled into the driveway. Alex stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, the echo of Jonathan's younger silhouette. His denim jacket smelled of engine oil from the auto shop he managed. "What's the emergency, Dad?" Jonathan gestured him inside, offered coffee that Alex declined. He led his son to the kitchen table where both reports lay side by side. Sunlight from the window paled the color charts. Jonathan's throat tightened. He tasted copper. "I did a DNA test," he began, voice husky. "For fun. Ordered one for Tyler, too." He tapped the papers with a trembling finger. "The lab says there's virtually no match between us." Alex glanced at the numbers, confusion knitting his brow. "That can't be right. I called them. They checked barcodes, confirmed samples, silence pooled." Alex's gaze drifted to the window as though answers might hover in the maple leaves. "You think Melissa—" He stopped, the name hanging brittle between them. "I'm not saying anything for sure," Jonathan said, though the report shouted certainty. "But the math is loud." Alex braced his palms on the table, head bowed. Jonathan saw the veins stand in his forearms, remembered teaching those arms to cast a fishing line. Minutes crawled by. Finally, Alex straightened, eyes glassy yet hard. "I need to talk to Melissa, and I need you to hold on to these results until I understand them." He folded the papers gingerly, as though they might cut him. Jonathan reached across, covering his son's hand. "Whatever happens, I'm here. Tyler is still Tyler." Love doesn't rewrite that Alex's jaw worked. Maybe love doesn't, but lies do. He pocketed the papers, hugged his father in a grip that bruised bone. Then he was gone, the screen door banging like a gavel. Jonathan remained at the table, Ruth's clock marking each second with unnerving composure. He pressed a palm over his heart, felt its rhythm stumble, then correct. The photo album sat nearby, innocent and damning. He closed his eyes, and a single thought repeated like a drum underwater. How did a quest for heritage become a fault line beneath everything I hold dear? Outside, wind rattled the sycamore leaves. Green now, but destined to turn and fall. Jonathan understood, with a clarity colder than winter rain, that the October gathering would no longer be a simple celebration of lineage. It would be a reckoning. The sun climbed, but the house felt dim. Jonathan rose, reached for the album, and began turning pages, no longer sure which faces belonged to him, or he to them. Yet even as grief pried at the seams of his certainty, another urge stirred beneath the sorrow, to seek the fuller story, however it might rend or mend what remained. Melissa heard Alex's truck long before he knocked. The garage door rattled as he pulled in without killing the engine, then stopped abruptly, as if he feared momentum itself. She set her phone face down, silenced a cooking video still playing, and wiped her hands on a dish towel already stained with tomato sauce. Tyler was upstairs tinkering with a model rocket. The house smelled of garlic and simmering basil, an ordinary Wednesday evening dressed in its most convincing disguise. Alex stepped into the kitchen, eyes searching for ground that would not crumble underfoot. She offered him a tired smile, oil slick thin, and reached for a second spoon, hoping a taste of marinara could postpone whatever shadow rode on his shoulders. He ignored the spoon. "We have to talk." Words even the sauce couldn't sweeten. Melissa gestured toward the living room, but Alex shook his head and remained by the stove, framed by copper skillets Ruth had given them their first Christmas. He pulled 2 folded pages from his jacket. They trembled, whether from the draft slipping under the back door or from his hand, even he could not say. "They're wrong?" she asked, though she had yet to read the headers. "I called the lab twice. Dad called. The sample numbers match." Her pulse thundered in her ears, a drumline calling retreat. But there was nowhere to retreat, not in a ranch house lighted like an interrogation room by the late sun slashing through blinds. She forced herself to unfold the first sheet. Percentages and haplogroups glared up, foreign yet intimately, catastrophically familiar. Across the top, a bold bar read, "Parent-child match probability, less than 0.1%. For a moment, the world shrank to the rustle of paper and the hiss of tomato sauce spitting at the pot's edge. She wanted to argue statistical outliers, lab contamination, anything. Instead, she tasted copper on her tongue and registered that every alternate heartbeat belonged to panic. "I was lonely," she began, words brittle as dried pasta. "You worked nights at the shop, double shifts when Mr. Kowalski got sick. I made coffee runs, bills runs, grocery runs." Each syllable felt like pushing pins through her own skin. He was just a friend. Someone who listened. Alex's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice level. "A friend who listened?" "A mistake," she whispered. Tears blurred the page until the numbers swam like fish startled in a pond. "I thought it wouldn't matter once I knew you still loved me." Alex gripped the counter, stainless steel suddenly warm beneath his palms. "I loved the future I thought we were building. And Tyler, he is my future." He swallowed hard. "But you never gave me the truth to choose it freely." Footsteps thudded overhead. Tyler's voice sailed down the staircase. "Mom, you need this extra parachute fabric?" He appeared at the doorway, rocket pieces gleaming in his hands. The sight of his earnest face, a perfect echo of Alex's childhood grin, tore fresh edges into Alex's composure. "Not now, bud," Alex managed, forcing a smile that felt like lifting iron. "We're in the middle of something." Tyler hesitated, sensing the static charge in the air, then retreated upstairs, door clicking shut. The tension snapped back. Alex folded the papers again, lining the edges with precise care, as though neatness could keep the universe from spilling out. "We'll schedule a meeting with a counselor, with attorneys if necessary," he said. "But tonight, we keep it from him." Melissa nodded, tears streaking mascara she had worn for no one in particular. "All I ever wanted was for him to feel secure." "Security built on a sinkhole still falls," Alex replied softly. He left the kitchen, closing the garage door gently behind him, like lowering a coffin lid. She sank to the tiled floor, clutching the dish towel as if it might plug a hole in the hull. Jonathan spent the evening rearranging chairs on the porch that didn't need rearranging. The sycamore's bark cooled beneath his palm. He kept it there, grounding himself against its slow heartbeat. In the driveway, a single headlight finally swept across the lawn. Alex's truck. Alex stepped out slower than usual, shoulders stooped as if gravity had gained a cruel hobby. He joined his father on the porch without speaking. Crickets buzzed in the gathering dark. A lone firefly pulsed near the hedge, its green blink absurdly hopeful. "Did you talk to her?" Jonathan asked. Alex nodded. "She admits it. A friend one time. Says she panicked." His voice scratched like gravel dragged under a tire. "Dad, I keep running this loop. Was I blind? Did I make home feel so unsafe that she found someone else?" Jonathan shook his head. "Her choices are her own." But even as he spoke, he remembered long nights Ruth had waited alone when he worked double shifts at the mill, and unease fluttered inside him like pages caught in a breeze. They sat until the porch light flickered on automatically. Alex rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Tyler's the best part of me, and now this test says he's barely connected." Jonathan's hand closed around the album on his lap. "Blood isn't the only thread. You changed diapers, taught him to ride a bike, listened to him explain Jupiter's moons. No genome does that." Alex managed a wan smile. "You sound like a Hallmark card." "Maybe. But cards sometimes tell truths we ignore." Jonathan opened the album, flipping to a Polaroid of Alex at 6, mud-splattered, brandishing his first fish with manic pride. "You and I share blood. But what I remember first is learning patience, while you untangled my fishing line for the 10th time. That's family." Alex exhaled. "Melissa agreed to counseling. DNA or not, Tyler doesn't get shattered by our mistakes." His gaze drifted toward the upstairs window where Tyler's lamp cast soft constellations on the glass, a galaxy built of model parts and boundless sixth-grade wonder. "He deserves honesty. Careful, age-appropriate, but real." Jonathan nodded. "When you're ready, I'll be there." Alex clasped his father's shoulder. Silence stretched, but it no longer felt empty. Jonathan sensed the first threads of a new, fragile fabric knitting between them, less certain than lineage, more resilient than deception. Morning brought drizzle, a thin, needling rain that turned the porch steps slick. Jonathan brewed coffee and stared at Tyler's report lying open on the kitchen table. The numbers felt less like betrayal today, more like coordinates demanding navigation. He opened Ruth's Bible, not to a verse but to the flyleaf where she had written, "Truth without grace is a hammer. Grace without truth is a lullaby." The phone rang. Melissa's number glowed. Jonathan hesitated, then answered. Her voice sounded smaller, emptier. "Mr. Davis, I realize I'm the last person you want to hear from." "I'm listening," he said, surprising himself. "I'd like Tyler to visit this weekend as usual. He shouldn't lose his routines, but I can't face you without apologizing first." Silence inhaled, exhaled. "I broke the one real gift Alex gave me. Trust. I'm not asking forgiveness yet. Just a chance to keep being Tyler's mom, in whatever shape that takes." Jonathan closed his eyes, picturing Tyler's freckled nose, the way he whistled off-key while building miniature engines. He needs stability. If you both agree he comes, the porch light will be on. She thanked him through a tremor of tears. After the call, Jonathan wrapped the report in brown paper, tied it with twine as though binding a bundle of kindling, and placed it inside the cedar chest where Ruth's wedding veil rested. Not hidden, but contained, awaiting a day when Tyler would be old enough to ask his own questions. That afternoon, Jonathan drove to the auto shop. Grease fumes and country radio spilled from the bay doors. Alex stood beneath a lifted sedan, wrench poised, yet for once no smile at the sight of his father. Jonathan handed him a thermos of coffee and the brown paper package. "When the time feels right," he said, "these numbers are yours to share with him. But until then, they won't chase us around like ghosts." Alex wiped his hands on a rag, eyes moist but clear. "I keep thinking of Tyler's rocket," he said. "He's counting on mathematics to land something fragile back to Earth. Maybe we can do the same." Jonathan nodded. They sipped coffee in the resonant clang of the shop, two men recalibrating a constellation neither wished to chart, but determined, at last, to navigate together. Tyler's rocket components were scattered across Jonathan's dining room table like bright fragments of a future no one could yet name. Plastic fins, balsa nose cone, tiny altimeter chip. The boy had memorized every instruction, annotated each step in pencil. Yet this Saturday morning his hands moved slower, shoulders hunched as though gravity had discovered him early. Jonathan watched from the doorway, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa and the calm he'd been practicing all week. "Engine mount giving you trouble?" Tyler shook his head. "Mount's fine, just recalculating weight distribution." He avoided eye contact, unusually quiet for a child who normally narrated each bolt and rivet. Alex had phoned late the night before. The first counseling session had been raw, Melissa crying until words dissolved, Alex mostly listening, a therapist navigating between confession and defense. Tyler knew only that family schedules were shifting, not why. The secret had become a low-frequency hum inside every room. Jonathan recognized that hum. Years earlier, when Ruth fought cancer, the house had vibrated with unspoken fears long before test results arrived. He set the mugs down, placed a gentle hand on Tyler's back, felt tension beneath the boy's sweatshirt. "Your launch is Friday, right? We've got time." Tyler forced a smile. "Mr. Bullock says good engineering takes patience." Jonathan nodded. Smart teacher, that one. He thought of patience as a bridge suspended over uncertainty, cables taut but trembling. It could hold a boy and a grandfather if they walked carefully. Mid-morning sunlight spilled across the table, highlighting a page from Ruth's album propped against the centerpiece. A sepia photo of Jonathan's father at 16 beside a radio he'd built from scavenged tubes. Tyler liked the picture. He said it reminded him invention started at any age. Now, he glanced at it uneasily. "Grandpa," he asked suddenly, "do scientists ever mess up? Like, mix samples?" Jonathan steadied his breathing. In science, mistakes can happen, but good labs check, double check, triple check. Tyler chewed his lip, eyes darkening. "So if a test says something crazy, it's probably true?" Jonathan's pulse stumbled. He'd expected this moment later. Sometimes results surprise people. But surprising doesn't always mean bad. He reached for a fin, sanded the edge with fine grit. "Remember when we found the fossil in the creek? You thought it was a rock until you saw the shell imprint." Tyler nodded slowly. "I guess discoveries can hurt and help." "Exactly. And no matter what any test says, the people who love you don't change." Tyler's shoulders eased, just a notch. They worked side by side, fitting the engine mount and aligning fins. By noon, the rocket stood upright, gleaming red. Tyler grinned, genuine this time. Jonathan felt the hum quiet for a breath, but he also sensed the storm clouds gathering behind every unsaid answer. Monday afternoon brought a gentle September breeze and the smell of freshly cut grass on the middle school field. Dozens of students swung rockets under their arms while parents gathered along the makeshift launch line. Tyler's class had earned permission for an early test flight. Friday's full launch would count for grades. Jonathan set up 2 folding chairs. Alex arrived from the shop, grease still under his nails, exhaustion etching lines near his mouth. Melissa parked at the far end, sunglasses shielding eyes swollen from another night of fitful sleep. The three adults formed a crooked triangle, each wary of stepping into the other's shadows. Tyler carried his rocket like a fragile torch. He waved at Jonathan and Alex, offered only a half nod toward his mother. She flinched but walked over, kneeling to adjust the parachute pack. "Remember your checklist," she murmured. Tyler muttered thanks, eyes on the horizon. "Mr." Bullock called the first student forward. A yellow rocket streaked skyward, parachute blooming in a flawless arc. Applause rippled. Tyler was next. He fitted his model onto the launch rod, connected igniter wires, then jogged back to the safety line. Jonathan felt his own heart echo the countdown. 3, 2, 1. A sharp hiss, a flash, and Tyler's rocket lurched upward, veered, sputtered. The engine coughed out mid-climb. The rocket cartwheeled, nose smashing into sod not 50 yards away. Gasps, then silence broken by a single sob. Tyler stood frozen, fists clenched. Jonathan moved first, but Alex reached the boy quicker, wrapping an arm around shaking shoulders. Melissa approached, but Tyler turned away from her outstretched hand. "Leave it," he whispered, voice cracked. They retrieved the mangled rocket. A fin had cracked. The engine casing was charred. Tyler's eyes brimmed. "I did everything right," he rasped. Jonathan knelt. Even perfect prep faces surprised drafts. "We'll rebuild." Tyler shook his head. "Why bother? It was supposed to show I can land things safe." He looked from Alex to Melissa, resentment flickering like static. Melissa swallowed. "Ty, some failures teach more than success." He glared. "That what you learned?" The words landed like stones. Melissa stepped back. Parents nearby glanced over, sensing drama. Alex drew a deep breath and addressed Tyler quietly. "We're going to talk at Grandpa's tonight. Just us three. You deserve answers." Tyler's face blanched, curiosity and fear wrestling behind his eyes. He nodded. Jonathan watched Melissa's shoulders slouch under a weight she had built herself. In that moment, he realized the family's fracture was no longer hidden. It showed in every gesture on the sunlit field. The crowd's murmur swallowed their pain, but the echo would follow them home. Evening settled crimson over Jonathan's porch as Tyler, Alex, and Melissa gathered in a half circle of rocking chairs. No one spoke for a long minute. Cicadas shrilled like faulty wiring. Jonathan stood inside, kettle steaming behind him, reluctant to intrude yet unable to leave. Alex cleared his throat. "Ty, remember how we talk about data, using facts to understand?" Tyler nodded, clutching the damaged rocket in his lap. Alex continued. "We got some data recently that says I might not be your biological father." His voice cracked on might. "But data doesn't erase memories or the choices that made us a family." Tyler's breath hitched. "What data?" Melissa's sunglasses were gone, eyes naked and red. "A DNA test," she whispered. "I made a terrible mistake before you were born." "Something I kept from your dad." Tyler stared at her, dawn of comprehension turning to shock. "So Grandpa's test wasn't a surprise game?" Jonathan stepped onto the porch, setting Coco on the rail. He met Tyler's gaze. "I wanted us all to learn history together." "I never meant to hurt you." Tyler's lower lip trembled. "If Dad's not my real dad, who am I?" Alex's voice was firm, gentle. "You're Tyler Davis, the kid who can tell Jupiter's moons apart and fix Dad's old carburetor." Biology didn't teach you that. Work, curiosity, love did. Tears slipped down Tyler's cheeks. Everything feels upside down. Jonathan knelt beside him. Roots can twist underground and still hold a tree steady. The album in my living room. Some people in it aren't related by blood either. Ruth's sister adopted twins after 13 miscarriages. No one loved deeper. Tyler wiped his face with a sleeve. Will I have to choose? Melissa reached for his hand. No. Choices belong to adults right now. We see a counselor Friday. We figure out next steps together. Alex squeezed Tyler's shoulder. No matter what paper says, I'm not going anywhere. Wind rustled the sycamore leaves overhead, scattering a few onto the porch between cups of cooling cocoa. Jonathan exhaled slowly, sensing the fragile bridge of trust sway yet hold. But as they sat in that tentative circle, Melissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, went pale, and silenced it without answering. Alex noticed. Who was that? She swallowed. No one important. Except her voice betrayed her. Jonathan caught the caller ID before it dimmed. Christopher S. A name neither he nor Alex recognized, but the tremor in Melissa's hand suggested its gravity. The hum returned, louder than ever, vibrating through the boards beneath their feet. Tyler hardly slept after the porch confession. He spent the night in Grandpa's guest room listening to the sighs of the old house. Pipes groaning, floorboards whispering, the distant tick of Ruth's heart-shaped clock. And he imagined each sound as a question with no safe answer. By dawn, he was already dressed, clutching the broken rocket like a talisman. When he tiptoed into the hallway, he found Jonathan awake in the kitchen, grinding beans by hand instead of using the electric mill so the noise would stay soft. They didn't speak at first. Jonathan poured 2 mugs of cocoa, steam curling like fragile letters in the air. Tyler traced his finger along the rim. Mom's phone buzzed last night, he said finally. Dad looked scared. Jonathan set the grinder down. Sometimes fear isn't about danger. It's about not knowing what's next. But what if what's next is worse? Tyler's voice cracked. What if that caller is my other father? The question carved a hollow even Jonathan had not prepared for. He chose his words carefully, stacking them like stones across a creek. We don't know who called or why. Knowing will be hard, but guessing is harder. Guesses grow teeth. Tyler nodded, though unease tremored in his shoulders. He unwrapped the broken fin, smoothing the splintered edge. Mr. Bullock says the only failed launch is one you don't learn from. Smart man, Jonathan said, and a plan unfurled in his mind like a map to steady ground. How about we rebuild? Tyler's eyes flickered with reluctant hope. Launch is Friday. Plenty of time if we start now. They gathered tools from the shed, fine grit paper, epoxy, balsa scraps. Working side by side, Jonathan told stories about his father's radio and the music it carried through wartime nights. Tyler listened, sanding the new fin until it fit flush. Hours passed, tension dissolving into shavings on the porch floor. By noon, the rocket stood repaired, fresh paint drying in the autumn sun. Jonathan saw something settle behind Tyler's eyes. Not certainty, but a thread of resolve strong enough to guide him through the maze of the coming days. He ruffled the boy's hair. Every flight worth taking starts shaky. A car door slammed out front, Alex's truck, followed by Melissa's sedan. Tyler's shoulders tightened again, but he set the rocket gently on the rail before stepping inside. Alex entered first, jaw clenched. Melissa followed, clutching her phone. She looked as though sleep had refused to visit her too. "We need to talk," Alex said, voice low but strained. "This can't wait for counseling." Tyler stood behind Jonathan, fingers digging into the old man's sleeve. Jonathan placed a hand over the boy's knuckles, and together, they faced the storm. They gathered in the living room, the same room Ruth had once filled with gospel vinyl and the smell of lemon polish. Now it felt like a courtroom. Light slanted through the blinds in harsh stripes, dust motes drifting like unsettled jurors. Alex broke the silence. "That call last night, who was it?" Melissa inhaled, steadying herself. "His name is Christopher Sanders." She looked at Tyler, lips trembled. "He's the man I was with. He found out about the DNA results too." "How?" Alex asked, but Melissa's gaze slid toward her phone. "Social media," she admitted. "I posted a picture from Tyler's science fair last spring. He saw the resemblance." Her voice cracked. "He wants to meet his son." Tyler swayed. Jonathan guided him to the sofa. The boy's eyes were wide, not with tears, but with the stunned focus of someone bracing for impact. Alex paced, palms pressed to his temples. "You told him?" "I didn't mean to," Melissa said. "He messaged me, recognized the birth date." I panicked. She turned to Tyler, voice gentling. "Sweetheart, I was going to tell you when you were older." "I'm old enough to build rockets," Tyler whispered. "Old enough for truth." The sentence seemed to lift the floorboards. Jonathan felt history pivot. The child who had lived on bedtime stories now demanded the unvarnished version. Alex knelt in front of his son. "I've raised you since the day you were born." Nothing changes that Tyler's lower lip quivered. "But biology matters, right? That's why rockets fall if math is wrong." Jonathan spoke softly. "Biology is physics. Love is engineering. Good engineers adjust the design when forces change." Alex squeezed Tyler's shoulder. "We will adjust together. Meeting someone new doesn't erase our family." Melissa wiped tears. "Christopher wants a conversation, not a custody battle. He's willing to follow whatever process the counselor and lawyers recommend." Alex's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to him, alone first." Tyler glanced at Jonathan. "Can Grandpa come?" Jonathan's heart lurched. He met his son's eyes. Alex exhaled. "Dad understands family more than most. Yes, he can come." They scheduled a meeting for Thursday evening at the counselor's office, neutral ground where no one's history hung on the walls. Tyler, meanwhile, would stay with Jonathan to focus on rebuilding and launching his rocket. The decision took shape like a fragile bridge from known to unknown. When Melissa left, Tyler did not hug her. He offered a tentative nod. Alex lingered, pressing his forehead to his son's. "Keep that rocket steady," he whispered. As the cars pulled away, Jonathan closed the door and locked it, not to bar the world out, but to keep the cocoon safe for 48 hours. The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome, counting down to a new orbit. Thursday dusk poured lavender shadows across the counselor's parking lot. Jonathan parked beside Alex's truck, both men stepping out in near unison. Alex adjusted his collar twice, a soldier preparing for unknown terrain. Inside, the waiting room hummed. Soft lamps, neutral art, a small fountain bubbling with forced serenity. Christopher Sanders stood when they entered. Mid-40s, tall, lean, the nervous poise of someone walking a tightrope above two versions of himself. His hazel eyes flicked from Alex to Jonathan, landing on the older man's calm like a lifeline. Jonathan offered a hand first. "I'm Jonathan Davis. Chris." The handshake was firm, yet tentative. The counselor, Ms. Patel, guided them into her office, walls lined with books whose spines spoke of conflict and reconciliation. 3 chairs formed a triangle. Ms. Patel sat a bit apart, notebook balanced. Alex began. "My son Tyler is 12. I've loved him every day of his life. Nothing changes that." He looked at Chris. "But truth matters." "So talk." Chris swallowed. "I met Melissa when Alex was working nights. It was 3 months. I didn't know she was married." Regret coasted through his words but did not drown them. "I left town for work before she found out she was pregnant." Jonathan watched Alex's shoulders stiffen. Chris continued. "When I saw Tyler's picture, I recognized myself. Same chin, same left-handed grip on the model airplane." He paused. "I'm not here to replace anyone. I want to know the boy. Offer whatever support he needs. Financial, emotional, medical history." Alex cut in, voice brittle. "Support is earned. Trust doubly so, Miss." Patel interjected, guiding them through statements of intention, boundaries, timelines. Jonathan observed Chris's sincerity. No theatrics, just steady, penitent steadiness. He respected that. But Alex's pain simmered, edges raw. After an hour, they drafted a tentative plan. Chris would write Tyler a letter first, introducing himself without disrupting routines. Tyler could respond in his own time. Supervised meetings might follow months later, at Tyler's pace. Miss Patel emphasized flexibility. Healing had no timetable. As they stood to leave, Chris faced Alex. "I'm sorry." Truly, Alex's jaw clenched. Jonathan laid a hand on his son's back. Alex nodded once. No forgiveness yet, but acknowledgement. In the parking lot, night air felt cool and honest. Alex exhaled. "I thought I'd punch him." His voice shook. Instead, I felt relief. An enemy you can see is easier than the one you imagine. Jonathan considered the rocket ready for launch in the shed. "Tomorrow's flight will still be his," he said. "Our job is to keep the wind steady." Alex managed a tight smile. "And if it veers?" "We adjust," Jonathan replied, looking at the constellations pricking the sky. "Good engineers, remember?" They drove home to find Tyler asleep on the couch, rocket cradled in his arms like a promise he intended to keep. Jonathan covered the boy with a quilt Ruth had stitched decades ago, blue squares the color of a cloudless launch day, gold threads glinting like trajectories yet unflown. Launch day dawned under a sky so crisp it looked freshly washed, the kind of October morning that smelled of wood smoke and possibility. Tyler woke before sunrise, slipping from the quilt without stirring Jonathan. He padded into the kitchen, rocket clutched to his chest, and stared out the window at the dew-silvered yard. In the faint blue light, the sycamore's branches resembled the veins of a giant leaf, fragile, interconnected, yet stubbornly alive. Jonathan joined him and poured 2 mugs of cocoa seasoned with cinnamon the way Ruth used to. They ate toast in comfortable quiet while the news murmured low on the radio. At 7:30, Alex's truck rolled into the driveway, Melissa's sedan right behind. She carried a cardboard box labeled Flight Box, packed with spare engines and epoxy Tyler had organized himself. Alex knelt to inspect the rocket. Fresh paint gleamed flawless red, the new fin seamless. "Looks solid," he said, ruffling Tyler's hair. Tyler's smile was quick but genuine. Jonathan loaded a cooler with sandwiches and lemonade. Before locking the front door, he paused at the cedar chest and ran a hand over its lid, acknowledging the sealed DNA reports inside. They would wait for another season. Today belonged to upward motion. The school field buzzed with anticipation. Students in bright jackets, parents clustering with cameras, a light breeze tossing pennants on the safety line. Mr. Bullock greeted them at the registration table, raising an eyebrow at Tyler's rocket. "That's the cleanest repair I've seen in years," he said approvingly. "Ready for redemption?" Tyler swallowed, then nodded. Jonathan felt a collective inhale sweep the family. The counselor's plan lay heavy in each adult's pocket. Chris's letter had arrived that morning, but remained unread, waiting for Tyler's decision. None mentioned it now. They focused on trajectory and calm wind speeds. One by one, rockets screamed skyward, parachutes blossoming like bright flowers. When Tyler's turn came, he steadied the launch rod, methodically clipped igniter leads, and jogged back behind the rope. Melissa lifted her phone to record, but Alex gently lowered her hand so they could all witness unmediated. Tyler keyed the hand controller, voice cracking but determined. 3, 2, 1. A hiss, a flash, and the rocket shot up in a straight crimson line, arrowing through the crisp air. For a heartbeat, it seemed to hang at apogee, sunlight glinting off its nose cone like a signal flare. Then, the ejection charge popped. The parachute unfurled in a perfect white bloom, and the rocket drifted down slow and graceful, landing upright not 10 yards from the pad. Applause erupted. Tyler's face broke open in a grin that lit the field brighter than the sun. Alex whooped, fist pumping the sky. Melissa clapped, tears bright. Jonathan's chest filled so fully he had to blink back his own tears to breathe. Tyler retrieved the rocket and jogged back, cheeks flushed. "We did it," he gasped. Jonathan hugged him hard, feeling the boy's heart hammer against his ribs. "You did it," he corrected softly. But Tyler shook his head. "Couldn't have rebuilt without you." As the field emptied, Mr. Bullock handed Tyler a certificate for best recovery. "Engineering isn't about avoiding failure," he said. "It's about learning fast." Tyler tucked the certificate into his folder with care, usually reserved for trading cards. The four of them returned to Jonathan's house for lunch, spirits buoyant. They ate sandwiches on the porch, laughter bouncing between them like a beach ball in summer. For a few hours, DNA results, counseling sessions, and letters from strangers belonged to a different timeline. Yet, when the sun tilted past noon, reality tapped gently. Alex cleared his throat. "Ty, something arrived for you this morning. A letter from Chris." He produced a cream envelope, Tyler's name written in neat ink. No pressure to read it now. Tyler studied the envelope, tracing the unfamiliar handwriting. He wrote, "Just me?" Melissa nodded. "We asked him to start slow." Tyler slid the envelope into his hoodie pocket. "I'll think about it." Jonathan watched relief flicker across Melissa's face, gratitude for a child's patience she hadn't earned. Late afternoon cast long bars of light across the yard. Alex drove Melissa home to rest before the next counseling session, promising to pick her up at 6. Jonathan stacked plates in the sink while Tyler rinsed engine residue from the rocket. The silence between them felt companionable until Tyler spoke, voice low. "Grandpa, were you ever scared of truth?" Jonathan dried his hands and leaned against the counter. "Many times. Truth is like open sky. It's beautiful, but it can drop a storm without warning." Tyler set the rocket on a towel. "Dad says truth and grace have to balance, but I'm not sure how." Jonathan smiled sadly. Neither am I some days, but I know this. Grace keeps truth from turning into a weapon, and truth keeps grace from turning into a lie. Tyler considered, then pulled the letter from his pocket. Will you sit with me while I read? Of course. They settled on the porch swing. Tyler opened the envelope carefully. The letter was handwritten in tidy script. Dear Tyler, you don't know me, but I've known of you for 12 years in the shape of regret and hope. I am the man whose genes you carry, but that is the smallest part of who I wish to be for you. I respect the father who raised you and the family that shaped you. If you choose, I would like to share my medical history, my passions for model planes and astronomy, and learn about yours. But only when and if you feel ready. I will wait as long as it takes. With respect and an open heart, Chris Sanders. Tyler reread the lines twice, then folded the letter neatly. He waits, he murmured. That's good. He looked up at Jonathan. Do you think Dad hates him? Hate takes energy away from healing, Jonathan said. Your dad is tired, but he's learning to use energy for building again. Tyler nodded. I'll write back, later. After the next counseling session, Jonathan squeezed his shoulder. Take all the time you need. They sat rocking, letter resting on Tyler's knee, rocket drying on the rail, two tokens of journeys begun, neither demanding haste. Above them the sycamore rustled, dropping a single leaf that landed square on the envelope as though sealing a pact with autumn. Evening gathered purple and amber along the horizon. Alex returned alone. Melissa had chosen to stay with her sister overnight for space to breathe. He joined Jonathan in the kitchen while Tyler showered. How was the letter? Alex asked. Respectful, Jonathan said. He's leaving the pace to Tyler. Alex exhaled. Good. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Dad, I keep toggling between anger and relief. Some hours I want to erase Chris from existence. Other hours I'm grateful Tyler will have an accurate health history. Jonathan poured coffee. Emotions aren't light switches. They're weather patterns. Let them pass, but steer your ship. He handed the cup over. Speaking of ships, Tyler's rocket? Alex's eyes lit. Straight flight, textbook recovery. Your son's engineering, Jonathan said, pride softening his tone. Comes from time you spent showing him how carburetors breathe. Alex smiled, weary but real. Maybe biology draws the blueprint, but nurture writes the operating manual. Footsteps padded in. Tyler wore pajamas emblazoned with constellations. He hugged his father hard. Thanks for not quitting on me, he whispered. Alex's eyes glistened as he hugged back. Never, he said. They settled in the living room with Coco. Jonathan fetched Ruth's album and opened to the Polaroid of Alex's first fish. He handed Tyler a blank archival page and a pen. Start a new chapter, he suggested. Put today's launch photo here. Leave space for what comes next. Tyler clipped the certificate beside the picture and wrote beneath it in careful block letters. First flight repaired, landed safe. He hesitated, then added a small arrow pointing to empty space. Beside it, he wrote, Letter received. Response, pending. Jonathan felt a tremor of awe. This boy, perched on the edge of adolescence and upheaval, had chosen to chronicle uncertainty rather than fear it. They talked until the pendulum clock chimed 9. When Tyler yawned, Jonathan guided him upstairs, tucking the letter into a drawer alongside spare launch lugs and folded fin templates. Some truths weight better than others, he said. Tyler nodded, eyelids heavy. Downstairs, Alex lingered at the album. Dad, you never told me the album could grow. It never stopped, Jonathan replied. I just forgot to add pages. Alex closed the cover gently. Neither of us expected a DNA test to redraw our tree. No, Jonathan said, but trees that survive storms send deeper roots. He gestured to the sycamore swaying outside the window, branches stark against the moonlit sky. See how it leans? Every gust shapes it, but it still reaches up. Alex looked toward the staircase where his son now slept. Letter safe, future unwritten. He inhaled, letting the scent of cinnamon and old leather steady him. We'll lean, he said. We'll reach. Jonathan placed a hand on his son's shoulder, and when the next gust comes, we'll adjust the design. Father and son stood together in the quiet house, listening to the steady tick of Ruth's clock, each swing a promise that time, like love, moves forward, one measured beat at a time. Outside, the repaired rocket rested on the porch rail, crimson paint catching moonlight, ready for another launch whenever the sky invited.